Hey everybody, welcome to another World Warships replay, and this time I'm in the Fubuki, the Tier 8 Japanese destroyer. Now I haven't had a lot of luck in this thing, especially recently.
Anti-aircraft guns and
But
secondary
this
armament
game
disabled.
turned out to be a pretty good one. Right away I've got the east spawn, so I decide to head for the easternmost channel, point C. And our MAN is following along in support. Our other destroyer has spawned on the opposite side of the map and is going to cover that side. Straight away I decide what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get the MAN to stay to the left by the shoreline, and I will fire off a full spread of torps across the channel. Wargaming thankfully shortened the reload on torpedoes for destroyers by a significant amount, so now they're actually useful. Previously on the higher tier destroyers it would take you 1.5 to 2 minutes to reload, which was just hideous. You were lucky to get more than 1 or 2 decent spreads off a match, and out of those you'd be lucky to get any hits. Now, with the much shorter reloads, it means you can actually use your destroyer to deny an enemy a narrow channel like this early in the match, or you can repeatedly ambush careless enemies. It gives you some ability to get into close range fights as well, whereas before you would have been totally defenseless for over a minute while you waited for your torps to reload. So I put out my full spread of torps there. 9 torpedoes. They've got I think it's 15 kilometer range on the Fubuki. The MAN stays out of the way and lets them pass him. We can see an enemy cruiser heading down through the left side of these islands. That is in fact their Kitakami, and sure enough we have a customer already. It's the enemy Benson. Now, Benson, being a US destroyer, has really good guns. Its turrets traverse incredibly fast, and those 5-inch guns fire quite quickly. So if I can take him down before he gets a chance to focus me, I'll be doing quite well here. For now, he's devoting his attention to the MAN, although he doesn't appear to be getting very many effective hits on him. And the MAN gets some massive ones in there before he gets finished off. So that's a success already. Unfortunately, it looks like all my torps missed, but I have another spread ready, and the MAN is out of the way once again, so I get ready to fire these ones off. Now I have to wait for this wreck to clear out of the way, either to sink or for me to be past it, because torpedoes will hit shipwrecks and it will detonate them. The enemy Phoenix starts pushing on us, gets a critical hit in there, 2 criticals in fact, but I'm able to get away. One of the problems with destroyers is that because they're such small targets and relatively fragile, often 1 or 2 shells will crit almost every module on your ship, which is not something you really want. So although they can put out an enormous amount of damage in a very short amount of time, destroyers are easily crippled by even stray shells. I wasn't sure if this spread was going to hit anything. It wasn't looking good at the moment, and you can see our teammates dealt with a Kitakami there, but in fact the Phoenix floated straight into 2 of the torpedoes and blew up. And then the Congo drifted into 1 as well. So 3 hits there. I'm pretty happy with that. And by the time I come around this headland, I should be loaded to fire some off at the New York. He's not paying attention at the moment, and I can see he doesn't have the upgraded hull. He's still on the pre-war hull, so he actually doesn't have very good anti-aircraft. Not that it matters to me, because I don't have any aircraft, but able to get some HE into him and light him on fire. I held my fire until I was actually within spotting distance. I didn't want to light myself. I wanted to wait for him to light me before I opened fire. So I launched some torps, some on his course, some just past it. He gets a hit into me, but then I launch some just behind his course as well, in case he begins a turn. I'm still lit, but I figure if I get past him quickly enough, I can actually out-traverse his guns. So much for that, they're staying pretty firmly on me. So now I just have to hope that he goes down before he can find his mark. Looks like he's about to cruise straight into those torpedoes, so I can shift my attention for a moment to the enemy Farragut, who is engaging me at long range. Sure enough, 2 torps are enough to sink the New York. Farragut is having trouble hitting me here, but he's not exactly making my life easy either. The main problem isn't so much that he's firing at me, it's that he's keeping me spotted, which makes it extremely difficult for me to try and get shots into this Colorado, who I think was AFK or crashed or something, and only just returned to the match. He only just started moving when I began lining up these torps. Put out another 3 spreads. Again, spacing them out to try and predict his course, no matter what he does. I do get hit by the Farragut there, finally, but I'm able to repair the damage to my engines and haul ass away.
Concentrate fire on the designated target.
I try to get my teammates to focus on the Farragut,
The enemy team has taken the lead.
because I'm expecting at least some of my torps to maybe tag the Colorado, and that should soften him up a bit. He's no longer looking this way, he's focusing on our cruisers, it looks like, and he's about to drive straight into some torpedoes. 2 hits, one on the bow, one on the stern, and there go a whole bunch of hit points, and I'll be reloaded very, very shortly, which will allow me to fire off another full spread of 9 torpedoes in his general direction. He is actually shifting his attention to me. I guess those torpedoes woke him up. And I'm getting dangerously close. I am now within his secondary gun range. I managed to get a couple of torps off. In fact, actually 9 torps, full spread. But I'm taken down by his defensive fire. It's looking a little questionable for a moment here. But there's 1 hit, there's 2 hits, there's 3 hits. Down goes the Colorado. I would have liked to have stayed alive a little longer and gone and torped some more ships, but I'm certainly not going to complain about 3 sunk ships, 10 torpedo hits, and flooding caused on every single one of them. Now, I think I alt-tabbed for a minute here, so for the next minute or so, you're just going to see me staring blankly at empty ocean. I may as well take this time to sort of talk about destroyers and what their deal is. So basically, destroyers play kind of like the T-49 in World of Tanks, in that they are easy to kill, but they're supremely mobile, and if you can position them well, they have an enormous amount of firepower. So, a lot of the time in destroyers, rather than trying to close in with the enemy and, melee them at torp range, which you can do at the lower tiers, you can do it in the Clemson, you can do it in the Nicholas, you can do it to some degree in the Minikaze, but you can't really do it in a Fubuki, because you'll just get absolutely fucking pasted by cruisers and battleship defensive guns. So instead, what you need to do in higher tier destroyers like the Fubuki, especially the Japanese destroyers, which have very slow traversing turrets and very long range torpedoes, is use that range on your torpedoes to sort of deny areas to the enemy early in the game. Even if there's not an enemy spotted there, if you know it's a place the enemy are going to go, fire your torps down it and see what you can catch. Basically just fishing with explosives. Even if you don't get anything, it may deter enemy ships from actually going into that area. If they see the torps in the water, they'll figure, oh, nope, there's a destroyer in there, not going. And that can help your team out. The other thing you will be doing is reconnaissance. because you are much harder to spot than a battleship or a cruiser, because you are quite fast, you can zip around the map spotting things as long as you are disciplined enough to not shoot at them. Most destroyers don't get spotted until they're within about 7, maybe 7.5 kilometers of the enemy, so you can get quite close, and at that kind of range you're going to be spotting cruisers and battleships before they see you. Cruisers are generally the better reconnaissance units because, like destroyers, they are quite fast. They're obviously bigger and easier to spot, but they're not quite as fragile. They have a bit more firepower, and the most important thing is most of them have scout planes, and cruiser scouts stay airborne for a very long time. So cruisers are the go-to scouting unit, but destroyers work in a pinch. And here we have a very interesting Japanese aircraft carrier. I always thought the Japanese aircraft carriers were fascinating. A lot of them don't even have islands. It's just like they slapped a fucking deck on top of a battleship hull, totally flat, and the command deck, the bridge, is often in the front of the ship. They're really odd-looking things. Quite cool.
Our victory is in sight.
And here we have the North Carolina. So this is where the US battleship tree starts to get real. The North Carolina looks very much like the Iowa, probably because it was the predecessor to the Iowa. Very similar in terms of playstyle. You have 9 16-inch guns. Your turrets traverse faster than the equivalent Japanese ships, but still not exactly lightning fast. Your secondary armament is a bunch of 5-inch or dual 5-inch general-purpose turrets, which means they can be used as anti-aircraft guns as well, which means the US battleships at higher tiers have ridiculous defensive capacities against aircraft. It's also a very nice looking ship. I really like the look of the wartime US battleships a lot more than I like the pre-war ones. But yeah, destroyers. They work in a pinch for spotting. They are quite good at laying an ambush, but you need to know what you're doing. By laying an ambush, I mean positioning yourself so that an enemy battleship will turn around a headland next to you completely unsuspecting into a wall of torpedoes. The other thing destroyers can do, and it revolves around smoke, is lay a smoke screen and then either hide in it themselves, remembering that smoke is going to come out of your ship mostly from the back. So if you're charging at the enemy smoking, it's not going to do shit, they're still going to see you. What happens is, if you lay smoke and then turn back in behind it, or lay smoke and then stop and reverse into it, they're not going to see you. And so you can sit in your smoke screen just shitting out shells and torpedoes, and they're not going to be able to actually see your ship. Now, they might be able to fire back at you, just predicting where you are based on the incoming shell traces, and in fact, really, they should be able to. It's not that hard. But it makes it a little more difficult for them to get return fire back into you, and it also means that friendly cruisers and battleships who have rather a lot more firepower than you can also pull into your smoke and begin blasting shots off at the enemy. And a smoked up battleship is actually really hard to see, although working against its smoke is really annoying for battleships to deal with because they usually can't see through it, which is why you could see one of our team's battleships getting really mardy about smoke earlier, because he couldn't see what he was doing. So the game's come down, not quite to the wire, but it's kind of close. We have a carrier who's out of planes, a North Carolina who's more or less intact, and one of our cruisers, the New Orleans, who's doing quite well for himself. For their part, the enemy have a single New Orleans and a Mogami. Now, the Mogami could potentially clean this up if he didn't just do that. He has the torpedo firepower to take out the North Carolina, and he has the guns to take out the carrier, and a lot of speed as well, but he ran himself aground, and that was pretty much curtains for him.